There is furniture behind orange roll-up doors across this country that no one has touched in years. A couch from a marriage that ended. Boxes from a parent who died. Baby clothes from kids who are now in high school. The stuff sits in the dark, on autopay, accruing rent every month while the people paying for it try not to think about what it would actually mean to go deal with it. The United States has more than 52,000 self-storage facilities. 14.5 million households use them. The industry's estimated value in 2024 was over $44 billion. That is larger than the Hollywood box office, larger than the music industry, built not on luxury and not on entertainment, but on overflow, on the gap between how much American life produces and how much American life can hold. This is not a video about clutter. It is a video about what happens when a country makes accumulation easy, makes housing unstable, makes life transitions fast and hard, and then builds a business to catch what falls through. I'm Marcus Chen, and this is Built This Way. You have probably driven past one of these facilities this week. If you live near a highway or near an industrial corridor or near the outer edge of almost any mid-size American city, you know the physical signature. Orange roll-up doors, keypad gates, long rows of corrugated metal behind a chain-link perimeter. They sit in the middle distance of commercial life, so completely integrated into the background that most people have never paused long enough to think about them as an industry. Invisibility is worth examining. Here is the scale, and it runs well past what most people would estimate. In 2023, the United States had roughly 52,300 self-storage facilities covering approximately 2.1 billion rentable square feet. 2.1 billion. If you divided that evenly across every household in the country, every household would receive a 10 by 10 unit, and there would still be space remaining. The household penetration rate, the percentage of American households currently renting at least one unit, is 11.1%. That is not a niche. That is ordinary American behavior. The companies are not small operators. Public Storage had interests in more than 3,000 facilities covering 221 million square feet at the end of 2024. Extra Space Storage operated or managed more than 4,200 locations across 330 million square feet by the end of 2025. U-Haul, which most people think of primarily as a truck rental company, reported more than 1 million individual storage units and nearly 94 million square feet. These are not family sheds behind a fence. These are institutional asset portfolios managed by publicly traded real estate investment trusts, valued on quarterly earnings calls, and analyzed by the same class of investor that prices office towers and apartment complexes. The product, though, is not square footage. The product is the option to postpone a decision that feels too costly to make right now. That distinction matters. We will come back to it. The modern self-storage format is typically traced to Fort Lauderdale in 1958. Public Storage was founded in 1972. Extra Space traces its operating roots to 1977. For most of those early decades, the industry was regional, fragmented, and unremarkable. Local operators serving local overflow at the edge of commercial strips. What turned it into a $44 billion institutional category was not a single invention or a single company decision. It was the slow alignment of four forces that American life kept producing with increasing consistency. The first is mobility. In 2024, 11.8% of Americans had moved within the past year. Moves generate storage demand directly, the gap between leaving one space and fully settling into the next, the items that do not fit in the new place, the boxes that get loaded into a unit with the intention of sorting them later. The second is urbanization. As of 2020, more than 82% of Americans lived in urban areas. That number is projected to pass 89% by 2050. Urban living means smaller units, less built-in storage, and less room for the material accumulation that the surrounding consumer economy keeps producing. The gap between what people have and where they live is a structural feature, not an individual failure. The third force is accumulation. If you watched what I did on grocery stores, the video about how layout and shelf position are negotiated outcomes between retailers and manufacturers, not neutral stocking decisions, you already have a version of this. The same economy that engineers the shopping environment also made consumer goods cheaper in real terms than they have ever been. Acquiring things got faster and easier. Sorting and discarding got harder and increasingly more emotionally expensive. The asymmetry is not accidental. The fourth force is life instability: death, divorce, downsizing, job relocation. The industry calls these demand drivers because that is precisely what they are. The customer arriving at a storage facility is usually not doing so by preference. They are inside a transition they did not plan, on a timeline they cannot fully control, making a temporary decision they expect to revisit once things settle. Then the pandemic arrived and compressed all four forces simultaneously. Between 2019 and 2021, the share of Americans working from home nearly tripled, from 5.7% to 17.9%. Millions of people reshuffled their living arrangements inside of 18 months. Storage occupancy averaged 96.5% industry-wide in the third quarter of 2021, up from 91.5% at the start of 2020. When that wave subsided, a storage executive described demand as having returned to its traditional center: housing transition, moving, death, divorce. The pandemic did not create the demand. It briefly illuminated how large the permanent demand already was. The mechanics are worth understanding precisely. Most storage leases are month to month. This sounds like it would make the business fragile. Customers can exit whenever they choose. The industry discovered the opposite was true. Short-term leases give operators the legal ability to reprice frequently. According to Extra Space's own filings, existing customers receive rental rate increases at least annually. Public Storage told investors it typically raises rates on long-term tenants every 6 to 12 months. The month-to-month lease is not a concession to the customer's flexibility. It is the mechanism through which operators keep the right to raise rent on someone who is already there, without renegotiating a longer contract. Extra Space reported that the average length of stay for customers who vacated their same-store units in 2024 was approximately 17.5 months, nearly a year and a half, for a product the industry consistently describes as temporary. Two of those things fit together. The third one is doing a lot of work. The customer arrives during a disruption, a move, a loss, a divorce, intending to stay 3 months. The disruption resolves, or at least recedes. The unit does not. The rate increases. The auto-pay continues. Because the unit is off-site and out of daily experience, closing it requires a deliberate act of sorting and processing that keeps getting deferred. If you watched my video on subscription cancellations, this architecture will be familiar. The same auto-pay invisibility, the same gap between intending to stop and actually stopping, the same conversion of a temporary decision into something that requires effort to interrupt. The storage version has one additional layer the subscription industry does not. You have to physically go deal with the objects before you can close the account. You can cancel a streaming service in an afternoon. Dealing with 300 cubic feet of a dead parent's belongings requires something most people do not have available on a regular Thursday. You have probably sensed that the temporary framing was not quite accurate. You were reading it correctly. The actual filing language makes the design explicit. Extra Space describes spending significant management time actively managing rental rates, with systems capable of setting and adjusting prices daily across the full portfolio. This is not a passive landlord waiting for the market to tell it what to charge. This is a yield management operation that happens to lease physical space instead of airplane seats. There is also a revenue layer that rarely appears in general coverage of this industry. Public Storage operates what it calls a tenant reinsurance program, insurance on the contents of storage units sold through the company itself to the company's own customers. In 2024, that program generated $170 million in net operating income, up more than 60% from 2019. $170 million in a single year from a product most customers are paying for alongside their monthly rent, usually without examining it as a separate line item. The storage unit is one revenue stream. The insurance on what is stored is another. The rate escalation engine is a third. The building earns the customer, time earns the money. More than 80% of self-storage customers are residential renters, not businesses. The industry's own research identifies the core demand drivers as moving, divorce, death, and downsizing. The customers are ordinary people at difficult moments, transitions they did not plan, losses they did not schedule, life events that arrived faster than their capacity to sort through the consequences. The product was not designed despite that context. It was designed around it. The customer in the middle of a housing transition has high urgency and limited time to comparison shop. The customer handling a parent's estate has emotional constraints that make fast decisions impossible. The customer going through a divorce is managing a dozen simultaneous pressures, none of which are storage optimization. The demand for temporary space is highest exactly when the customer's leverage to negotiate, delay, or push back is lowest. That asymmetry does not disappear once the unit is rented. It persists. The monthly charge is small relative to the alternatives: renting a larger apartment, paying to ship things, hiring someone to manage an estate, making a decision about a grandmother's dining table before you are ready. The financial math of staying in the unit keeps winning over the emotional math of leaving it. Month after month, year after year, rate increase after rate increase. And then there is what happens when someone stops paying entirely. Storage lien laws exist in every state. They give operators the legal authority to seize and sell a unit's contents when rent falls past a defined threshold. Public Storage operates an auction platform specifically for this purpose. Properties it holds on lien are listed and sold, often online, to the highest bidder. The items being sold are frequently the accumulated material of a life that went wrong in an unexpected direction. A medical crisis that disrupted the payment schedule, a job loss that arrived before the unit was emptied, a grief process that simply did not move at the speed the lease required. The lien sale is disclosed in the contract, legal under state law, and the mechanism by which the business recovers the value of unpaid rent. It is also the point at which the entire system, the entry during crisis, the auto-pay renewal, the rate escalation, the deferred decision, reaches its conclusion. Someone else gets the dining table. The contents of lien units, as a cultural matter, became the subject of a multi-season television franchise. The drama of what is behind the door, it turned out, was entertaining. That is not a critique. It is just an accurate description of how far the system extends. Consumer protections exist in some states. California prohibits storage rate increases above 10% during covered emergency periods. Florida classifies unconscionable storage pricing during declared emergencies as unlawful. These rules exist because regulators observed what happens when disaster intersects with a product whose demand spikes exactly when people are least equipped to respond. The protections are an acknowledgement that the baseline asymmetry was real enough to require a legal countermeasure. The unit holds more than objects. The lease accounts for that. From here, the story becomes one of consolidation because the industry did not stay fragmented. For most of its history, self-storage was a local business. Thousands of independent operators, regional chains, family-owned facilities that competed on convenience and price without much technology involved. The barriers to entry were low: land, a building permit, a management office, and the long tail of small operators was wide. That landscape changed quietly, and then less quietly. The scale advantages available to large operators, pricing software, data systems, lower cost of capital, brand recognition that reduces customer acquisition costs, compound over time in a way that disadvantages smaller facilities. An operator running daily dynamic pricing across 4,000 locations extracts more revenue per unit than an independent operator managing one facility by hand. The consolidation that followed was the arithmetic of any capital-intensive industry where information advantages widen. In early 2023, Public Storage launched an $11 billion unsolicited bid for Life Storage. A takeover attempt, not an invited conversation. Life Storage declined. Within weeks, Extra Space announced its own acquisition of Life Storage, a deal that reached approximately $15 billion, including debt. The largest storage transaction in the industry's history. Extra Space then migrated the entire Life Storage portfolio onto its operating platform in 19 days. Not a staged transition, not months of system work, 19 days. I want to be precision about what that means. Life Storage, at the time of the deal, was one of the largest storage operators in the country, moving its full portfolio, pricing systems, customer accounts, rate management onto a competitor's platform in under 3 weeks is not a real estate achievement. That is a software deployment that happens to have physical buildings attached to the output. Extra Space projected at least $100 million in annual run rate synergies from the combined operation. Then, in 2026, Public Storage agreed to acquire National Storage Affiliates for approximately $10.5 billion. The combined company would hold roughly 327 million square feet across nearly 4,600 locations. Expected annual synergies were projected between $110 and $130 million. One report noted that if all that square footage were gathered in one place, it would cover the area of a small city. It is not gathered in one place. That is the design. The infrastructure is distributed across every highway corridor and suburban margin in America. The pricing and operating logic runs centrally. You are renting from a facility that looks local. You are inside a portfolio that is managed on the same logic as a financial instrument. Extra Space, at the end of 2025, managed more than 1,850 facilities on behalf of third-party owners, properties it did not own, but operated under management contracts. The company describes that third-party management book as a future acquisition pipeline. Manage it first, buy it when the terms are right. The loop is not complicated once the components are visible. The consumer economy made acquiring things easy and frictionless. The housing system kept living spaces smaller and people more mobile. Life instability, death, divorce, downsizing, relocation generated urgent storage demand on timelines the people experiencing it could not control. At the intersection of those three forces, a business appeared. And the business, once it appeared, designed its lease structures, its auto-pay defaults, its rate escalation schedules, and its pricing systems to convert the temporary into the durable. It did not need to manufacture the demand. The demand was already structural. It just had to make staying easier than leaving. America found a way to sell the stuff, shrink the space, accelerate the transitions, and then rent a box for what didn't fit. And when enough people needed the box, it became an asset class with a yield management platform, a reinsurance product, and a consolidation strategy that moves at the speed of a securities filing. Every one of those orange roll-up doors is part of that system. You probably drove past several of them this week and did not think about any of this. Now you will not be able to stop. If this video gave you something, the like button is right there. It matters more to this channel than most people realize. Subscribe if you are not already here. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you rented a storage unit, and did the temporary plan actually stay temporary, or did the months accumulate without you fully noticing? Tell me what happened. I read more of those than you would expect.